have been packing on the pounds in preparation for their hibernation. Last year, a 1,400-pound brown bear, aptly called Bear Force One, was crowned champion. It always goes viral, this particular poll, and you have till the 10th of October to get your vote in. Great pictures here on BBC News.
Now on BBC News, the biggest African and international news stories. Focus on Africa.
Live from Nairobi, this is Focus on Africa on BBC News. Our top stories. France commits to withdrawing its troops from Niger as soon as this week, following a coup in the country earlier this year. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa launches a new agency aimed at securing the country's borders. Also in the program, a win for same-sex couples. Mauritius' highest court decriminalizes gay sex, saying the ban reflected colonial laws. And after reaching the semi-finals of the last World Cup, Morocco gets to co-host the tournament in 2030. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa. I'm Rhoda, Odhiambo. We begin with our top story in Niger, where France has said it will begin withdrawing its troops this week. The announcement by the French army follows weeks of tensions between Paris and Niger's military rulers. The decision to pull out troops from Niger is believed to leave a gaping hole in Western efforts to counter a decade-long Islamist insurgency, with some questioning how the move would impact French influence in the Sahel. Indeed, could it allow Russia to increase its influence in the region? So let's take a look at how we got here. It started with France's rejection of the coup in Niger on the 26th of July. Paris was unwilling to recognize the junta in Niamey. The military men in Niger turned to Russia. In September, French President Emmanuel Macron declared the end of France's military cooperation with Niger, stating that the withdrawal of the 1,500 soldiers will be done by the end of December this year. The pro-junta group, M62, has been spearheading protests across the country, demanding the departure of the French forces and accusing France of working with a number of countries to destabilize the Sahel. France deployed its troops to Niger to counter jihadist groups across the Sahel region. Some 400 troops were placed alongside local troops near Niger's borders with Burkina Faso and Mali. But with irregular food supplies of food and repeated anti-French demonstrations, the situation was no longer conducive for their continued stay in the country. Niger will now require tougher military strategy to hold rampaging Islamist insurgents at bay. Since the 16th of August, nearly 100 soldiers and an unknown number of civilians have been killed by militants linked to the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group. So how is the withdrawal being perceived in France? Let's now speak to Emmanuel Dupuy, who is the president of the Institute for European Perspective and Security Studies. So Mr. Dupuy, thank you so much for joining Focus on Africa. How much of an impact, how is the reaction in France? All right, thank you so much for your insight. That Mr. Emmanuel Dupuy joining us from Paris. Let's now head to Mauritius, where gay sex has been decriminalized by the highest court in the country. Judges said that the ban was the result of colonial-era laws rather than indigenous values. Same-sex relations were criminalized by the British rulers in 1898, but in recent years, that's rarely been enforced. Parliament will still need to repeal the colonial-era law, though before same-sex relations are officially legalized. The decision comes during a time of rising homophobia and tougher gay laws in some states such as Uganda and Ghana, whereas others, including Angola and Botswana, have relaxed their rules around the issue in recent years. Let's now speak to one of the people who brought the legal challenge, and his name is Ridwan Asik. He's the president of the largest organization in Mauritius, championing the human rights of LGBTQI people, and he joins me from Rose Hill in Mauritius. So Ridwan, how has this ruling been received in Port Louis?
The country.
Well, that is Ridwan Asik joining us from Rose Hill in Mauritius. And still to come after their stunning semi-final success at the last Men's World Cup, Morocco is chosen to co-host the 2030 tournament. Welcome back to Focus on Africa. Now, Morocco is set to co-host the 2030 World Cup along with Spain, Portugal, Uruguay, Argentina and Paraguay. This will be the first time the tournament will be played in 3 different continents. The decision was made at a virtual meeting of the FIFA Council and will need to be ratified in a further vote. The joint Morocco, Spain and Portugal bid was Morocco's 6th attempt at hosting the global fete. The announcement is welcome news for the North African nation, still reeling from a devastating earthquake that left thousands dead. Morocco is a soccer powerhouse on the continent itself and also globally after a stunning World Cup in Qatar. For more on Morocco's rise in the world of football, I'm now joined by Amin El Amri, a Moroccan sports journalist and commentator. So, Amin, how has the news been received in Morocco? Okay, Amreen, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights. That's Amreen joining us from Casablanca. Now, South Africa has launched a border management authority to deal with the movement of illegal goods, illegal migration, and human trafficking. Speaking at the launch, President Cyril Ramaphosa said, ultimately, the agency would also facilitate lawful trade in a more efficient manner. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa was also present at the launch in Musina, Limpopo, one of South Africa's busiest borders, that's Beitbridge. The Border Management Authority is the country's 3rd law enforcement agency after the police and the army. Hundreds of border guards have been recruited and will be working together with the Defence Force. They'll be manning South Africa's ports of entry, which include 8 seaports, 52 land borders, and 11 international airports. Previously, managing the borders was the task of 4 different government departments. Joining us from Musina in South Africa is Stanley Zawia. He's a chairperson of the NGO Forum. So Stanley, if you could give us an insight, what else will the Border Management Authority be able to control in terms of illegal immigrants? Stanley, can you hear me? Well, that's Stanley. We've not been able to get him due to technical challenges, but he was going to give us more insight about the Border Management Authority that was launched today by South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. The agency is aimed at facilitating lawful trade among the countries bordering South Africa, aimed at boosting intra-Africa trade, not only within the countries bordering South Africa, but across the African continent. Zimbabwe's president was also present at this particular launch. Well, feel free to get in touch with me. That's all the time we had for in today's program. Be sure to look into our BBC Africa website to get all the top stories that are trending in Africa. And if you love listening to podcasts, be sure to listen to the Focus on Africa podcast from where you get your podcasts from. That's all we had time for today. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.